fission. They fuse, throw off energy. That energy actually jumps an octave, picks up momentum, and the pattern manifests at a higher level, which is a more harmonic and harmonious level than density 1 and density 2. There's a way to use the Vesica Piscis where you can progressively, with each strand template, begin to take each part of your particle base and assist it easily on a daily basis to begin its transmutation process of progressively combining its polarity, which manifests in polarity thinking, where you have, if one part of you is thinking a happy thought, you're experiencing the happy thought, you have a part of you in the parallel system that's experiencing its downside. This is how thought works here. And there is a point, this is where the twists on the teachings we talked about last night, where there is an element where detachment is useful, but it must be engaged detachment. If you go into a space of detachment, it's like standing, looking at the Vesica Piscis, standing in that center point that is where the hologram manifests, and saying, I won't touch either of the other circles. You don't get anywhere. What you need to do is create that condition of reaction in yourself. Choose a reaction to circumstance where you fully know that, okay, I feel about this today. It's not a happy feeling, so therefore it's negative. It's telling you that it's made out of myons. What you need to do is combine it with this dion grid, and you bring its positive and its negative together into the center point, and they will transmute and jump an octave, which lightens the whole thing, which on a feeling level makes it feel less dense, more expansive, and happier altogether. And you've healed the negative side. The way to heal negativity isn't to abolish it. It's to love it, as they say. And if you can understand love as a state of vibrational harmonization that transmutes the negative back to its divine right state, then loving it makes more sense. There's a lot of people that go and say, oh, well, whatever it is, you still have to love it. You can't resist it, so I welcome everything in. And boy, these people eventually find out an interesting lesson of manifestation. You let everything in and just love it without knowing what you're doing when you're loving it. And because there have been teachings given here that twist the meaning of love, you tend to let all sorts of things enter your biofields that you never intended, and you're still loving it because you're told you're supposed to love it to make it go away, right? Loving it is reaching a state of harmonization with it, which you cannot do if you are judging its value. Things are of equal value in the hologram, but they have a different experience of sensation with them, and you have a right to have a preference of which you choose to experience, realizing that there will be a part of your consciousness while you're in density that will experience the other. And you can start to help the other portion of yourself, and that portion of yourself can start to help you by meeting in the middle point of engaged detachment, where you let both sets of feelings move through. If you have the happy end right now, try to just lean into a little, what would be the unhappy end of this, and see if a feeling comes up. Doesn't mean you want to hold it. You're just going to let it move through. You're going to help the part of you, and if it's stuck, you're going to be stuck. So it's worth helping that part of you that's not in this hologram, it's in the anti-hologram. If you bring the feelings together and try to see the full spectrum, where you have what's called a base tone, which is a lower resonating thought form, and an overtone, which is called the higher resonating thought form. The overtone is the antiparticle, which is a dion field, which interestingly, we as Mayan consciousness in the universe we're in project out the dion fields. What we're seeing is a dion grid when we see our hologram. We're actually seeing the higher harmonic, which means this is good compared to what this looks like on parallel, right? Parallel Earth is going through the same type of experience as we are. They move a little bit ahead of us in the timeline, and they've had a terrible experience with this particular set of events. It will affect us if we do not embody that experience and then take it someplace else. We meet it in the middle. We meet it in the inner Earth timeline. And the consciousness of us that's stationed in parallel Earth won't get stuck there, because if the parallel self gets stuck in a density level, so does its anti. You need both of them to come together and bring the consciousness together to be able to go up to the next level. So on a mass level, this is what's going on behind the scenes. Parallel Earth began its period of pole shift. it was about a year ago. I think it was November. So last November, I think it was last November that they told us that in their timeline, our last November was 2008. What this would mean is if we didn't do something over here to alter this pattern, it would naturally transfer over. It's like negative positive space. In the same place, the image would flash on over there, then it'd flash off there and flash on over here. We would be seeing a very close version of what they saw, unless we made a major thought field shift in the meantime that incorporated that thought field, which means becoming aware that it exists and it's part of us, and taking it, combining with it what we see is here, and taking it using energy and thought to a higher place on a large level. We would have, when we hit 2008, experienced the same thing. And it would have been the cataclysmic end that was foretold in Biblical Revelations. But Biblical Revelations was highly edited and twisted. There was an agenda that wasn't the Guardian's agenda that was added to portions of that book that told us they combined certain elements of particle conversion with certain other ideas that came from Anunnaki races and Draconian races that made it look like it was okay to have this struggle of good versus evil and all of that kind of thing, and God was going to save the good guys and everybody else was going to go through pain and misery. Now, it was put in a way that made it look like God was a very judgmental person. Like God was mad at those sinners because they didn't follow the rules in this book, therefore he was going to punish them. He, of course, was going to punish them and make them go into fire and brimstone where they would be miserable. And only the 144,000 good ones would ascend and disappear before your eyes. And if you weren't one of the ones that disappeared, that means you're stuck here. That means God must be mad at you or something. Time to repent, this whole thing. What has the translations that are in Revelations now were originally part of the truth of the books of John the Baptist and Jeshua that had told about the realities of physics involved with particle conversion and what needed to be done with the inner Christos and the inner energy fields to move through it safely, and that if you didn't, there would indeed be a phantom earth reality created. It also did tell about a battle between fallen angelic forces and the guardian protector forces, because that battle was set in 2326 BC, when in the last stellar activation cycle, the guardian groups literally shut stellar activation cycle down just as it started, where they still had time where they could stop it, because the Anunnaki invaded and tried to take over. So there was a lot of truth to Biblical Revelations, but a lot of distortion on, wait a minute, what does this mean to us? Does it mean we're supposed to, if we don't follow everything in the book, and if we don't follow the Pope or the other guy, or like how many people use the Bible now and say the other ones are wrong? You can't even figure out who you're supposed to follow if that were the solution. There are some truths in the Bible and there are some twists in the Bible. But the Revelations book was intended to tell us and prepare us for what we needed to do with our bodies, what we needed to do with Merkaba, in order to move ourselves successfully through these transitions and to finally end the problem that Earth has been having and the angelic human races have been having down here with fallen angelic invasion. It involved something that we'll talk about tomorrow that some of you have already heard about from some of the other workshops, which is the Planetary Christos Realignment Mission, which was the reason that humans were seated here in the first place, that had to do with getting the planetary shields, or the scalar wave blueprint of this planet, back to its natural D12 pre-matter configuration, so the energy lines could link up again between D12 running all the way down here. That would create something called a Maharic seal, a D12 frequency seal, that is a natural occurrence in a person or a planet if you have all of the scalar wave apartheid units in the template open to receive the 12 dimensions of frequency that go with the 4 densities of matter. So it's simply, we are going to heal the planetary grids, and that would stop the conflict that has been out of balance. Conflict, there will always be some degree of tension. If you didn't have some degree of movement of tension and polarities, you'd have a completely static universe and you'd have no movement, which is really the reality of how things are. There is technically no movement. It's all taking place in the same space. But to experience the hologram, it requires some degree of negative and positive interacting with each other. But when the balances swing so far in one direction, which implies somewhere they're swinging so far in the other direction, that it's going to literally keep both sides locked in time and change that format where one side can literally destroy the framework that both exist within. That means the consciousness in that hologram would get fragmented back to units of space dust, and it would not have the opportunity to experience the joyful feelings of what it means to evolve and embody progressively more until you expand to become one again with Source. So the fact that this time matrix, this planet, has gone into the negative pendulum swing. And there's been things in the Hindu teachings talked about the yugas, and I believe they call it the Kali Yuga, that was the dark cycle. Well, we've been in a dark cycle. We call the words that are used in the CDD place are Yuegos. It's spelled differently. It's Euyago. And I'm not sure what the Hindu translations of time are, but a Yuego is a one harmonic universe time cycle. Harmonic universe is one density level for a planet. How long it takes that planetary body to get projected into that framework and to accrete all of the frequencies into it, which will activate all the frequencies in its template, which will then allow it to move up and shift into the next harmonic. That's natural evolution for planets and for people. So we have been stuck for numerous cycles here. It's 22,556 years. 26,556 years is one Yuego time cycle for Earth. We have been stuck here for over 200,000. This planet has been stuck in its time band going round and round and round in this frequency because of things that have been damaged. And the humans were put here to assist in healing this, so the planet and every species on it could evolve. Because it's not something that's just affecting us. Every plant, every animal, every mineral, every unit of conscious air, every elemental consciousness, every particle unit down here has been stuck in this time matrix. It's been like a prison in density 1. This was the time when it was supposed to be healed, when all of the right elements came together, where the pendulum that had swung so far in the negative here and so far in the positive somewhere else could be brought back into the middle, and the two could be reunited. Where our timeline is going to go is linked with the inner Earth timeline, which will take us through into union with the extreme happy universe that went too far in the extreme happy, which can take you into really strange spaces of polarity as well.
Is that parallel to even Anunnaki at D10? Because that was I'm wondering, is there a parallel to fallen angelic that's extremely in the opposite direction like you're mentioning? Is that within our own harmonic universe?
Yeah, which implies somewhere there's humans that you wouldn't want to deal with too. But there are differences in this one fact. Now, there would be the higher and lower aspects, let's say, of each of us, of fallen angelics and angelics that didn't fall. But that doesn't mean humans, for instance, became fallen angelics. This is about as fallen as we've got. We never went into the agenda of seeking to take over the time matrix or anything like that. There are degrees of higher and lower that are applied. This time matrix is connected to one that went into the extreme lower frequency, and something happened to it which is called being blown off the grids. That means its template literally blew apart part of its structure, where it can't connect to its parallel structure anymore. So it literally becomes a finite time field, like a little circulation of energy that is a time field with a planet in it and with a galaxy in it that can't go anywhere. It can't bring in higher dimensional frequency. And the more times it repeats its own time cycle and keeps pulling in more and more and more of the density 1 particles, it gets denser and denser and denser and more magnetic and more magnetic. And eventually all of its energy pulls into its core and it implodes. So that's where Phantom Earth is going. That's the time band it will be drawn into because of its co-resonance. Now, this time matrix didn't have that bad of an experience, but it was headed in that direction. We would have merged with that time matrix if the intervention wasn't given. So there's a lot more that I'll talk more on the planetary level of things when we get into tomorrow, because there's some things I want to get through today first that have to do with us and thought, with us as individuals, so we can begin to understand some of how we can shift our thinking to allow us to use our thought processes in a way that support us, rather than in ways that they just seem to be on autopilot, and once in a while you get lucky and things turn out in your life the way you'd really like them to be. Usually it's just not too bad, so it's tolerable, so you deal with it. But there are things that we can learn about thoughts. Where do they come from? Where do they go? I can give you, with those questions, a basic understanding of it. This is where those really monster diagrams I was talking about, where they show the flow of energy from one dimension to its counterpart in the inner earth, to its counterpart in the parallel, and then back through here, all the way up the 15-dimensional scale. And they show what angle of rotation of particle spin happens between each one. I won't be able to, off the top of my head, take you through all of that. But I can basically explain that when we have dimensional structure, there is, in fact, I'll use the time matrix one for this, honey, please. This is the basic structure of relationship of energy when we talk about dimensionalization. Now, what this shows here is, first, if you consider out here, the thing that has no borders, that just goes off infinite, would be source. So this exists, let's say, as a thought form within the mind of source. And it's not a flat thing laying there in the mind of source. It is a set of energy relationships that allows for certain experience to be known. What we have first here, these first three bands in this diagram, are called the primal sound fields. These are where the Partakai units are in their off position. It's a field of vibration, which is sound. Now, here, this border here, that literally defines an area in source, where source is limitless, boundaryless. First, a contraction of source's attention takes place. It creates a contraction, a single point of focus within itself, in order to create from that point. So this is called a magnetic repulsion zone, where this black line is around the outside. It's a way of moving consciousness that creates a force of resistance that allows parameters to be set within itself, parameters to allow for the creation of a specified thought field. So we have what we consider the void. You have source, the void, that's where in the beginning was the void, and in the void was the sound, the first word of God. God spoke, and then there was light, right? Here's that. You have the void. The sound fields, there are three levels to the sound fields. One is what will manifest when it turns to light as the Partakai field, one that manifests as the Partakai field, and one that manifests as the Partakam field. They are sound tones. They have the sound tones going this way of Kundara. That's where Kundare comes from. It can be pronounced Kundara or Kundare. But that's where the word for the Kundare, primal life force currents, sound currents, comes from. They are the first currents of consciousness projected from source through the void that forms the primal light fields. These three levels here, dimensions 15, 14, and 13, form what's called harmonic universe, HU5. They are the first translation of these sound vibrations into turning on the light switch and taking vibration and moving it into oscillation, where the standing scalar waves turn on into their on position. So this field flashes off, but its imprint and potentiality is always held there, and it turns on here as the primal light fields. So you have the void, the sound, and the light. That's where the creation stories were trying to explain to us in very simple terms. In the ancient of days, simple terms weren't used because it was just explained like this. These diagrams were actually very, very ancient. They're translations of very, very ancient pictograms that were used without having to put the numbers in. The image itself held a mathematical encoding, and by looking at it, one would get direct cognition of all of the information it contained, which is a lot more than you can stick on with little paste-up numbers. So there are ways to use the diagrams. Some of the diagrams in these books that you see repeated often, like this one, has been used to show all sorts of different relationships in here. It's in the Cathara books, and it's in the Templar books. This is also a powerful symbol code, a mathematical programming in light and sound and scalar patterns that you can use for meditation that will start to bring lots of information to you, and it will help you activate DNA. All right. So once we get into here, you have, this is called Density 5. That's the last of the densities we'll see as we expand outward to Source. All right? Our consciousness came in from being at one with Source, moved through the void, turned itself into the void, then turned itself into the primal sound fields, then turned itself into the primal light fields, and then began to turn itself in, or embody within itself, the structure of how scalar waves operate and flash on and off. This is how we formed our template to get us into where we could experience the hologram. That right now, we're down here in dimensions 1, 2, and 3. Harmonic universe 1, density 1, matter. That's the heaviest matter form. As you move upward in the scale, you go into lighter and lighter matter forms. As you came in from the primal light fields would be like gaseous light, let's say, if we were going to compare how known substances, such as water, operates. Well, water can become a gas when it's heated to a certain level. The more flash lines you have, the faster those flash lines are moving. The more movement, the more heat is generated. So these are the hot fields, the flaming light fields, that have basically no density. They are the pure antimatter fields. Now, little subharmonics of these are imbued in all of these, because all of these actually take place within that field. So that's like the background frequency to all the smaller frequencies that other things are built from. Just like Source is the background frequency, the quantity of energy within which all the rest takes place. Same thing with these primal light fields up here. When we get into here, where we start to go from density 5 primal light fields, and we have the 3 primal light fields that correspond to the 3 levels of sound, when the first level, the first sound of Source, expands into a light field, that's called the ecstatic level, by the way. It's called the ecstatic level of Source. It's the first level of individuation, or if we're going upward to expansion, the last level of expansion before you're at full at-one-ment. All right? That translates actually into D13 frequency, which is called the blue flame or the blue light field, but it's actually a pale turquoise color. All right? The polaric level translates into the D14 field. That is the yellow light field. It's actually pale yellow, but it's often called the gold light field, and is associated with, this is where we get, some of you that know the work, you have the keepers of the blue flame, the gold flame, and the violet flame. The flames they're talking about are the full set of frequency codes in the template, in manifestation when you're down here, that allow you to anchor these frequencies and bring them in, and the levels of consciousness that go with them. Now, the triadic level of the sound matrix forms D15, which is the violet light spectrum. But it's actually not regular violet. That would be D7 frequency. It's a pale magenta, so it's more of a pale pink look than a violet look. So these are sound becomes light, and then these light fields undergo polarization, where they're broken down into different flashline sequences and syncopated rhythms that create the rays, or the smaller dimensionalized divisions of the primal light fields that give us our full light spectrum, which means it also organizes units of sound. Light and sound are translations of each other. Light is when you flash on the standing scalar waves, which would be going into part K, base electric phase. You flash that off in one time matrix, and it turns to sound. And there's also that same relationship on a smaller level that goes down between each of the dimensional fields. So this is the framework that we're within. We go from primal light into, this is the pre-matter template that I talked about. The D12 pre-matter template, and it's called hydroplasm. That's liquid light. It looks like pale silver liquid light when you see it with the higher vision. The colors of the light spectrum are the wavelengths, what from the human eyes here, what we would perceive if we were looking at a certain wavelength that went with the Partakai units, how high those little standing waves were. You could compare it to understanding it that way. So each of the dimensions has a specific wavelength, and as science here will teach us, wavelength is what determines color to our vision, because our senses are geared in a way to interpret wavelength into color, and also into form and distance in the projection of our hologram. That's a key when we're working with energy and with symbols and with getting more conscious control over what we are creating. Because if you want to pick a frequency, if you want to use D5 frequency, and you know what color D5 frequency is, you can direct it simply by directing color. So it becomes a key to unlocking the potential of directing frequency consciously when we begin to understand color translations. They're actually very simple. When we start with D1, working our way up toward prematter, remember we have density 1, that's the gross matter density. Density 2 is semi-etheric, which means it's about half as dense as it is here, but it still has a definite physical, chemical clothing translation that is part carbon-based, like it is down here. Density 3 is considered etheric matter, which is moving into the silica and selenium, I believe, chemical forms of clothing, which gives you a different type of matter that would look like the ghost images that, when you watch TV and they're going to do a ghost scene, they have this like kind of 2D looking character that comes in that's see-through. Well, that's kind of like the type of matter when you're looking at it from here that it would appear as. But when you're in it, it creates a different type of reality field, but you still feel yourself in a solid body. But it's a solid body that has lots of things like it can do with itself. It can walk through, it can make a wall, and it can walk through it. It's a thought form reality much more closely and obviously than our hologram. And then we have the pre-matter liquid light template that starts at D10 and works up to its full expression, which is the divine blueprint, at D12, where it holds the original imprint of source and self. Now when we're working up this way, each dimension is a wavelength, is a color, is a frequency band. D1 is red, D2 orange, D3 yellow, D4 green, D5 blue, which is like an electric blue color, like the gas flame blue. Okay, D6 is indigo blue, which is more of a deep kind of, a little bit, it's more of a murky looking blue, but it has a very high resonance to it. And it's actually more in a more intense version of the D5 blue because it's picking up some of the D7 frequencies, which are violet. All right? The 8 frequencies are gold, where it'd be like a metallic, very deep yellowy gold kind of color, as opposed to the pale yellow D14 frequencies. D9 is silver. That would be the just regular silver. There's several degrees of silver that you would see. D10 takes you into what's called the black light spectrum, where you get D10 is like a sapphire color, blue-black. It's like a blue-black light. If you think of blue sapphires, the gemstone sapphire, it's like a blue-black light with a metallic quality to it. D11 is a dark silver, a silver-black light spectrum. D12 on its own, when you first get into its first 6 sub-frequency bands, appears white and goes into pearlescence, and then it picks up the pale silver because it's picking up the D11 band that it's connected to in the antiparticle, and it's blending the two together. This is the point where the two start to go into full transmutation and union, moving back out of form through the pre-matter template and starting to take the pre-matter template itself out of manifestation to pull the consciousness back up through the primal light fields for exiting the time matrix. So there's the basic spectrum. The color charts are in both of those manuals. I don't have any of them separately, but they're in a whole bunch of things. What you'll often see is with the different courses, I put some of the standard graphs in, so everybody gets to have it. If you're not interested in indigo children, maybe you're interested in this, well, it's there too, so you have the basic structure of the information. Okay, I think we're done with this part. Let's see what I have next on the thingies. Yeah, I'll do this one real quick. All right, this one. This just shows you. I'm going to go through this quick because there's probably several of you that have been through a lot of these. You're so sick of seeing these diagrams, I wouldn't doubt it if you want to scream. But those of you who haven't, it can be useful. That's why I'm doing this. All right, now, here we have the actual interface of how the harmonic universes or the density levels are stacked. We have, remember in the circular chart it showed harmonic 1, harmonic 2, harmonic 3, harmonic 4, harmonic 5. That was to show you the basic relationship. If you want to get into how polarity is working in angular shifts and rotational spin, what you end up with is you have harmonic universe 1, then you have harmonic universe 4, which is the pre-matter template, Then you have harmonic universe 3, the etheric template. Then you have harmonic universe 2, which is the semi-etheric. And then you have harmonic universe 5. There's all of these flippings in angles of perception that take place. It's not that important to know that. If you work with simply understanding the dimensional structure and working with Merkaba, which we'll get into, in the right way, where you're using the right numbers for rotating your Merkaba in the right direction, you will naturally move your particles in harmony with the natural structure. This also shows you that in each dimensional band, there's a harmonic universe, has 3 dimensions. Each dimension has 12 subfrequency bands, 12 primary subfrequency bands. It also has its 12 plus everything below it. When we get up to D12, it has its own 12, but it's 12 times 12, because it has the stuff that's below it. So it has 144 subfrequency bands. So you have D1 has 12, D2 has 24, 36, and you go up in increments of 12. So they're more and more and more powerful types of currents of energy that these systems are made out of. When we work with what is called the Maharata current, we're working with the D12 current that's bringing in the pre-matter current, which is the strongest current that can fully anchor into the Earth's template. But then you can anchor subharmonics of the primal light and primal sound fields, and together they're called the rainbow ray. You can anchor them into the planetary grids for advanced healing as long as you activate the Maharata D12 frequency first. So, for easy terms, the Maharata frequency is referred to as the Christos frequency, the D12 pale silver, liquid light, hydroplasm, Christos frequency. And then you have the Kirashe rainbow ray, which includes what's called the Rishik levels of consciousness and frequency that go with the primal light fields, and the Janus levels of consciousness and sound frequency that go with the primal sound fields. All right, so that's basically, this one is showing you the currents of creation, where we have our primal, we have source, the void. Here's our primal sound fields. They're the most massive, intense currents. When they anchor here, they are an invisible, standing, columnar wave. It's like being inside of, we talked about those little tiny wave points, vibration points, and we're made of them, so they're smaller than us, right? Well, when this current activates, it's as if our whole planet is one tiny little unit within one very big wave. And it is a frequency that has the ability to either hold in manifestation, change anything within the lower templates, or it could, if it were used wrong, which you can't do because you have to run it through the divine blueprint to get it here. If you could run it wrong, you could literally destroy the universe and blow holes in the mind of source as an energy field, which is a condition that source has actually allowed itself to experience in time matrices that have fallen off the grid. So these are the primal life force currents that we're going to be dealing with. We have primal sound currents are called the Kundare. The density 5 primal light field currents are called the Kirashe. The density 4 pre-matter liquid light divine template, Christos template frequencies are called the Maharata. You have the Antankarana frequencies that are the D7, D8, and D9 currents. Those particular, actually the Antankarana includes these, then it includes D4, 5, 6, and D1, 2, 3. So from D9 all the way on down is considered the Antankarana current. It's composed of 3 different Kundalini currents, which are dimensionalized sets of dimensionalized currents. You have the Antankarana, a 9-dimensional current that's broken down into 3 groups. The first one is the Kundalini current that's called the Turic current, T-E-U-R-I-C. That's the D7, 8, 9 current. When you come into density 2, there's the density 2 current is called the Doretic current, and it's dimension 4, 5, 6 current. That's a semi-etheric matter current. This is an etheric matter current. And the last Kundalini current is called the Telluric current, which is the dimension 1, 2, 3 frequency. These are the frequencies of energy that run from the base of your spine at the sacral all the way up your spine to give you your main vertical current, your life force currents, to bring the consciousness and circulate it through your body, through your chakra system, that brings your consciousness in. These are the currents of consciousness, the primal currents that your consciousness as an individual uses to move itself into the hologram and to stay there. When a template gets damaged, as this Earth's template has been, and that implies that the life forms have damaged templates on this planet because of the grid damage, which will transfer the damage right in, the same distortion in scalar wave template will go into the part of the person's template that is part of the planet or the animal or the plant. What it does is it blocks the natural set of frequencies that would run in the primal life force currents, which means it blocks conscious awareness from getting into the body. And it also blocks the body from being able to assimilate the natural progression of evolution, which is to be able to project yourself into the hologram and then back out simply by thinking it, simply by intention to do so. That's what we're supposed to be able to do. When we work with the Merkaba techniques that we're going to be doing, now some of you are familiar with them, and some of you they'll be new for. There are several techniques. One is called tribal shield activation, which I'll explain in a little bit. After the tribal shield is activated with sound tones, there's something called the salutations, which this is one of the things we're going to do at the beach this evening. We're going to go out to the beach, for those of you who want to come, about 9 o'clock, because there's too many people here. We can't do a salutation indoors here, because it's a stand-up and spin thing. Because we're going to talk about Merkaba and how it's inside the body. It's inside the DNA template. It's in inside of each level of the particles. Every little subatomic particle is one side of a Merkaba vehicle. But you also have a big one that hangs out in your auric field around your body. And there's a cone that comes down over the top of the head that transmits electrical energy, antiparticle energy, into your body. Pulls dyons in. And there's the other part that brings energy up from the Earth's grids. Brings myons in. It's the balance between those two and their direction of spin that controls all the other ones inside your body, which controls the activation level of your DNA template, and it controls the angular rotation of particle spin for each level of your dimensionalized body system. We have been trapped in time down here because there have been distortions to the planetary grids that made the small little Merkabas inside of our bodies that connect our D1 part of self to D2, or D2 to D3, D3 to D4, where they've made some of them run in reverse spin, where they create a magnetic force, where they repel each other instead of integrate each other. Because the Merkaba on the planet has been spinning in the wrong direction at the wrong rotational speeds since 25,500 BC. The salutations were the ancient rites that were always done by the grid keepers, by the security team for the Stargates, that simply help the planetary grid stay in balance and keep the spin of the planetary Merkaba going at its proper speed so it wouldn't have any problems running the Stargate frequency. At this point, putting the Merkaba on the personal level back into a healing position is only temporary because the planetary grids hit critical mass and they override what your thought form just did as far as shifting it. What we're being asked to do on a planetary level is create a very powerful type of healing, which is helping to reverse back to its natural spin, the planetary grids, so our own bodies will begin to heal. And we do it as individuals who reset our spin manually. Now, the spin ratios of Merkaba fields, they come from, back to Partakai, Partakay, and Partakam. There is a ratio of the breakdown between Partakai, Partakay, and Partakam. If you want to look at it as units of energy thrust, let's say. You have a Partakai unit in this density system, in this time matrix, or that's going to form this time matrix, that has 45 units of thrust. And let's say 360 units forms a sphere, a circle, or a hole. So you have 45 units of thrust that form the anti-particle unit. That's the Partakai unit. Then you have a replica of that, another 45 units, that is then polarized. This is your trinity. You have the whole, and then you have the whole split into two. So you have another one that equals 45 units, but it's split into two. Now, if they're split into two equal units, it'd be static, and they wouldn't spiral. They wouldn't start to create electromagnetic interference with each other, which makes them spiral, which sets movement in motion, or the illusion of movement in motion. The ratio that they were broken down at was the Partakam. The Partakam scalar waves are built on 11 2/3 units of thrust, and their corresponding Partakay units that form antiparticles are built on 33 1/3 units of thrust. And you put them together and you get your 45 units of thrust that match the other, which then brings it back around, 45-degree shift in angular rotation of particle spin, brings them together, and you have 90 degrees. All right? Which implies, if this one time matrix has 90 degrees, how many more time matrix are we directly affiliated with that would create the 360? But our portion of our Merkaba, planetary, galactic, universal for this time matrix, is the 11 2/3 magnetic spin ratio and the 33 1/3 electrical spin ratio. It is the natural ratio of balance between particles to antiparticles, and it is the balance that allows for those Vesica Pisces, where the spheres that are formed by the Merkaba fields can interact and intersect with each other, so you have the ability to move up and down through the dimensional scale at will by thought. It has the ability to set these back in their natural order, because right now, because of the magnetic reversals that are taking place in our Merkaba fields, and our Merkaba fields are outside of us here, but they are also inside of us from every unit of particle and antiparticle that we're composed of. When we have a Merkaba spin that is not spinning correctly, what it is doing is taking each particle unit that we have and breaking it down into a different unnatural ratio of balance. And what we've been running on right now has been a balance of, I think it was 34 magnetic to 21 electrical, which is like hugely dense as far as the magnetic particles. Too many particles compared to not enough antiparticles. Our matter here, as gross matter density, is twice as dense as it's supposed to be in density 1. And the reason our bodies die is because it's death by densification. It's blocking all sorts of things that would happen in the DNA that would create new things in the chemical DNA called nucleotide base chemicals that would allow for us to have our natural base 12 genetic alphabet. We're running on a base 4 genetic alphabet, which means when we talk about bases, they're simply called the nucleotide bases that form the little ladder rungs. If you know the DNA looks like kind of like a ladder, a spiraling ladder. We would actually have not just 4 chemicals forming those rungs, 4 chemical combinations. We would have 12. That's how our DNA is supposed to be. There's another amazing thing happening on the planet because of this distortion, because it's planetary, remember. It's being run through the planetary grids. It's not only human DNA that's being affected. But if we're 12-strand beings, let's say, because that's what the human imprint is, 12 strands of DNA, not 2, not 3, 12. If you turn off most of the template and only leave on the template for strands 1, 2, and 3, the only thing that's going to manifest chemically are strands 1, 2, and 3, which means you're not going to be able to have in your active template the apartheid receivers that will bring in your higher consciousness, your soul, your oversoul, your avatar, and your rishi level of conscious identity, which means you're stuck in time as a 3-dimensional single-vector consciousness who can't remember how you got here, why you got here, or what you're supposed to be doing, and you're scared to death of what's going to happen when your body dies because you don't know where you're going to go because you don't remember. That's the condition the humans are in. In the animal kingdom, the animals have been mutated by these planetary grid distortions as well. Their evolution has been stopped in time. It's like being in an evolutionary loop where you just never go up. You just keep going around and around until eventually you burn out. You eventually start to lose thrust that every time you go through a lifetime where your particles and antiparticles are running in reverse. Instead of creating more energy and jumping up, they start to drain more energy. And they start to slow down. And they start to get tired. And you start to burn out till your consciousness progressively digresses backward until you'll be lucky if you can be born as a mineral. You know? And eventually you'll be a mineral that's part of a planet that if it keeps doing that will implode on its core, will implode, and it will go back to space dust. And it's called, I think that's a supernova, I think they call them. Actually, no, I think a supernova is what we see when a planet actually jumps up in the next density. I don't know what they call that, but it leaves a black hole once that happens. So we're in a situation, anyway, where we have DNA mutations that were done on purpose here by fallen angelic races who are visiting again and talking to people in the channeling movement. They're calling themselves Archangel this and Archangel that. One of the favorites is Archangel Michael. And I don't want to offend anybody that might think Archangel Michael's a nice person. It's not even a person. It's a matrix of consciousness that's run by the Anunnaki groups. It's affiliated with Galactic Federation, and it's affiliated with the Alpha Omega Order Melchizedeks, which most people in the New Age movement don't know the difference between a Melchizedek cloister and an Alpha Omega Order Melchizedek. The Alpha Omega Order Melchizedeks are the Anunnaki groups of Melchizedeks who have been using, at times, when they needed something, they would work with the founders' races and be nice and pretend they were going to help everybody with the Christos mission. They were given trusts with sacred knowledge, certain portions of it, so they could help. And whenever it suited them, as far as their quest is to take over the halls of Amenti stargates, because they want to hijack this time matrix at D11, literally the whole stargate system, and they can do it from Earth through the halls of Amenti. These are some of the ancient issues that are coming up right now in our present hologram that were part of our ancient past. It's almost like the present is an ever-expanding and contracting at the same time onion skin, where we're one layer of the skin, that we're perceiving the skin of the hologram. And beneath that there's another, and beneath that there's another, and beneath that there's another. And it also goes out this way. If you're going this side of the skin, it's like a sphere. Then it's on the other side of the skin. There's more skin on this side, and there's more skin on this side. But somewhere in all of it, there's the seed. And the seed is the core time matrix structure, and the point where, before we all entered the hologram and got into the mess of polarization that's been taking place. Now, we're going to get into working with, when we come back from the, what time was the thing, so I don't go over and overshoot? 4 o'clock? What time is it? I can't see that. Oh, good, so I still have time. We'll get into technique. Now, we will be doing the tribal shield tone activations to begin the process of gaining control over our Merkaba fields when we get back from the break. But in the meantime, I want to explain a little bit more about structure. The structure that Partakai units take and manifestation templates take. We don't need that one. All right, this one is important. This chart gives you a basic understanding of the frequency relationships between our reality system, our hologram, the place I keep referring to as inner Earth, and parallel Earth, and also to Earth, Terra, and Gaia, and the dimensional structure. On this side over here, it's the Particum particle universe, which we have recently learned particum produce what? Myons, right? So consciousness that's stationed in here is myon consciousness, and it actually projects out its thought forms in its opposite. It projects out dions, and it sees the dions. It sees the other side as the positive space, as its space, as opposed to the negative space, the space between objects. Now over here we have the Partakai antiparticle universe, which is the universe that's the dion universe, the base electrical, that's the base magnetic. Base magnetic means its primary angles of spin are counterclockwise, which means it's spinning frequency up and out. That's the ascension side. This is the manifestation side, primarily. Now, they each interweave, where I told you before that diagram that was a nightmare to do that I haven't done yet, where you see actually each dimension flips from one to the next, including the ones in here. But you get a primary base as far as, is it primarily counterclockwise, which would be contracting. It would be contracting itself. First, it expands in order to contract. It expands back up to D12, and then contracts so it can get back out. It's your way out of the time matrix if you want to get yourself out of manifestation, or if you want to go from Earth to Terra, or Terra to Gaia, or density 1 to density 2 to density 3. Over here is the primary transmission universal system, which is made of the primarily dions. This is where antiparticle double lives. It's where your consciousness is stationed that experiences the hologram of manifestation. But it's the you that takes the other set of thought patterns that you don't. With every thought pattern, it implies there's a positive one that is a higher frequency, a negative one that is a lower frequency, and they may be benign thought patterns. It doesn't mean the lower one is a bad thought pattern. It just means it's a lower frequency and it has a higher expression, which would be the higher frequency, which would be this one. Then there's the middle zone one. So you have 3 thought patterns going on all at once and 3 selves that are experiencing them all. One station of consciousness is in a body here, one is here, and one is here. Here is the Partakai antiparticle universe. This is the blending of these two. And these systems, when you look up in the sky, you will see 2 suns. You will see what appears as the sun from here and the sun from here as the 2 suns of the inner Earth system planets. You'll also see much more light as opposed to darkness. These are the time bands that when we go through the star activation cycle and into what I talked about before as the bridge zone project. These will be the time bands that this one is going to be blended in with. Because if it wasn't, it was going to have a collision with this one in where these spins were reversed and they were not the way they were supposed to be. So they would repel each other, which would have thrown the particle base of this system into alignment with the fallen time matrix that's off the grids. So it would have pulled the whole Earth, Tara, and Gaia literally into that time matrix, which would have created a real intergalactic mess for a lot of species in ours. We're going to be linking with this time matrix. And this one is going to be linking with another one that cuts through at a different angle, which would be the anti to this one. And this is an expanded one. It's these two put together to make a whole, which implies there's another opposite to that whole that's, if you know, this would be bigger. This would be this one and this one put together equals this amount. Then you would have this one has an equal amount somewhere else, different time matrix. It's a neighboring time matrix. Not just a parallel, but a neighboring one that has its own parallel. It's going to get its link, the inner Earth will link to that other time matrix. It will give it enough thrust to hold this section of our time matrix intact, because this part right here is going into shift at this point. Parallel Earth, as I had mentioned before, is going into full roll. It's going into cataclysmic pole shift because their intervention didn't get there in time over there. Actually, the intervention was offered, but our antiparticle doubles of a lot of us there didn't want to be bothered. And they allowed more and more of the Anunnaki to invade through the New Age movement until there were so many people that used to be humans in human bodies that got bounced out of their bodies and they took over, that they started to run the Templar in reverse when the Stargates opened. Because they want control of the Halls of Mente Stargates. The only way they can get control of the Halls of Mente Stargates are by getting control of inner Earth. So what they're trying to do is go from our system and the parallel system, when the portals open, go in, invade, and run the Templar on a reverse matrix through the crystal pylon temples, which will send that reversal all the way up through the densities, and they will literally hijack a time matrix on a reverse. They will sever it from the grid. That's their intention. They have some real problems. The thought of wanting to do something like that just shows the state of illness of their consciousness. The consciousness of the fallen angelics isn't an evil consciousness. It's a part of Source. It's created of the units of consciousness of God, just like us. But you could look at it in this way, where in order to experience itself, God chose to look at itself, and it also chose to do the opposite, which was turn away from itself, to know itself in knowing itself in objectivity, and to knowing itself as if it didn't know itself at all. This is the stance toward Source that the fallen angelic races have taken. And they have a different evolutionary path that they will experience because of that. Eventually, if they don't make the other choice, where they choose to turn and meet Source head on and say, I am one with Source, yes, I am, we are one, and start acting in a way of love rather than separation, they will find themselves in a time matrix that falls off the grid and eventually goes back to Source, because it all goes back to Source. You can't escape from Source. It is the Source, and it's the only place everything takes place in. But they will go back as particle dust, as little vibrational units that don't hold a memory matrix with them. Yes?
The question that I have about this situation that I'm wondering for so long is, what is the motivation for them to continue in that place? And knowing that they will end up, do they know that they'll end up
This is the thing. It's the motivation, or the question was basically what is the motivation for them to continue, especially for so long. When you see some of the history here, it's been going on for like 250 billion years. This battle's been going on. Why? What is their motivation? What are they trying to accomplish? Why would they want to do something like this? And the answer to why is because they don't know any better. They're extremely intelligent. They know mechanics. They know the way things work. But there's something called code convolution. This is where you have a random element or a probability factor or a chance of fact, the opportunity for chance to take place within the creation of Source, even though you have divine order and divine chaos perfectly balanced. There is a factor in between the two of them that by combining energy in certain ways, there's always the element of surprise, like a scientist in a laboratory. Well, let's see, I'll mix this together and I'll mix that together and see what happens. And lots of times you come out with really neat stuff, and other times you blow up the laboratory and go, didn't mean to do that. Source is capable of knowing itself in those ways too. And that is what happened with the Anunnaki and the Draconian races. Basically, the founders' races are the races that seeded this time matrix. They started out first as Source. Source came into the primal sound fields as a collective of sound, of identity expressed as sound. They're called the Yanis, Ascended Masters level of consciousness. They're the real Ascended Masters, not little fake guys that say, I'm from D5, I ascended, because that doesn't count. You just went up a little. You have the Yanis consciousness collectives. You have consciousness collectives that came into the primal light fields. They're called your Rishi levels of consciousness. When you get down into the beginnings of moving into matter, into the pre-matter system, D12, 11, and 10, density 4. That's where we have something called the Christos founders races. That's where the primal consciousness of the Rishi, which is identity expressed as light, all right, doesn't have form, shape, three-dimensionality yet. It just is light. Where that comes down into the beginnings of form, into the pre-matter template, and into the hydroplasmic form, which is pale silver liquid light. It's like, I don't know if you ever saw the Terminator movies that had that guy that was made out of silver who he could turn into a puddle and then, build himself back up again and shapeshift and that kind of stuff. Well, it's kind of like that. And it looks like that, but it doesn't feel heavy like that. Looks like it feels kind of heavy to carry that kind of frequency around. These are the Christos founders races. And they had a primary template. It was a little bit different. You had 3 basic sets of Christos founders races that came out of the 3 primary identities that formed the 3 primary light fields. All right, in density 5, when the identity was still as light, you had 3 primary light fields: the blue flame, the Akkadic level, the violet flame, the triadic level, and the one in between, the gold flame. That was the polaric level. There's a level of identity, or a family of consciousness, that is each of those levels. You have those levels of consciousness connected to their corresponding larger gestalts of consciousness in the primal sound fields. In the primal sound fields, those identity levels, those 3 identity levels that each represent like a cosmic family of consciousness, are called the Ramyanas, that go with the violet sound field. There's the Vachiyanas, that go with the gold sound field. And there's the Grandyanas, that go with the Akkadic blue sound field, or the one that turns blue into light once it turns on into light. Now you have your Yanis families. You have in density 5, in pure light form, or gaseous light form, which looks like flaming suns. They're spheres of flaming light, gaseous light. What do we see when we look at our sun up there? A sphere of flaming gaseous light. But they're lots bigger up there, because this is only looking from density 1 to density 2. This is all the way up to density 5. These are the sons of God, the sons of light. The original meaning of that was not, they're all boys. It was, they are sons, radiating presences, beings of energy. Right? Well, each one of those 3, they're called the Brennau Rishi, the 3 Brennau Rishi families. You have the Emerald Order, Brennau, which correspond to the blue flame field and the Akkadic level of consciousness, the first individuation from Source. You have the Gold Order, and you have the Violet Order. Each of these 3 families of consciousness of light created founders' races. The Emerald Order created what were called the Elohai, Elohim. And their first form that was taken was a hominid feline. So actually, humans are closest related to the hominid feline, because the Emerald Order were the ones who created the original imprint for humans and have supervised the evolution of consciousness. In other words, human souls are fragments of the founders, the Elohai, Emerald Order founders, who have come into incarnation. Now, the human form was interesting because it was created as a cooperative venture between the Emerald Order, Elohai Elohim. The Gold Order, Seraphi, Seraphim. Now these were the old angel names that used to be in the Bible and in a few different reference books from ancient of times. The Seraphi, Seraphim created different primary forms. They created reptilian forms, insectoid forms, and avian forms. And they were good. They weren't negative draconians or anything. They were founders races. And then you had the Brahmarama, Christos founders races, that were of the violet Brenau Rishi, the violet order. They created primarily cetacean forms. Now, they were the beginnings of creating races in manifest form in this time matrix. And how you create a race is you create a thought form. I mean, you assemble this template, and it's going to be like this. And you create the template very well. The last life wave that these guys were seeded in here, or seeded this time matrix with, was 950 billion years ago. And it went really, really well until in time terms. Now, time is a point in vibration. So from this point in vibration, if you translated it into movement of time, these are where these time figures come from. All right? The point in this time matrix that would translate to 250 billion years ago, there was certain things that had happened. As the Christos founders race, it has made more smaller different types of races by combining the races that they had. Here on Earth, if families are a little too close, and there's a lot of inbreeding that happens within the genetic lines, distortions start to show up in the genetic template that begin to show evidence of the template not performing as it was originally intended, where characteristics that were desirable start to back off and you start to get mutations that weren't intended. This can happen in chemical DNA down here, because it's happening in the template. That's what causes it. And if it can happen down here, as above, so below, and vice versa. What happened that created the whole mess in this time matrix was one of the families of the Elohai Elohim had created a group of beings with the Brahmarama races, which are the violet ray races. And this group was an hominid ape form. The hominid ape forms were also a form of Elohim. They're originally part of the Christos founders races. Certain families of the Emerald Order and the Violet Order had combined to create this form. There were 3 planets that existed in density 4, and was called the Cradle of Lyra. And the beings that became what are now the Anunnaki, that used to be part of the Elohai family primarily, began to suffer from distortions of consciousness that were caused by distortions in their template, because they had mixed and mixed and mixed their own stock for so long that it started to create strange electromagnetic effects in the template. When you get distortions in template, you will get distortions in consciousness, perception, cognition, feeling, and understanding, even on that level. Because of the distortions that they had, there was a similar problem happening on a very nearby planet. The planets that I'm talking about were the density 4 equivalents of what was called Vega in Lyra. That was the D10 planet where the Seraphi Seraphim had seeded reptilian and draconian and insectoid type races. Then you had the D11 level of the Lyra system, the Cradle of Lyra, which was a planet called Avion. And then you had the D12 level of the Lyra system, all of which were connected to Earth, Terra, and Gaia, coming down in the densities. The D12 level is where the Gate 12, Stargate 12, was located. This planet was called Aramatena, which was the sound tone translation of its vibrational energy signature. Aramatena holds the divine blueprint. It's the D12 divine blueprint of all of the galactic systems below. It's just the pattern we're trying to reset, that's progressively being reset in this time matrix to heal it. The Elohai Elohim were from that planet because they were appointed as being the Akkadic representatives, the ascendant masters that had come in as the blue flame light fields and then had come into manifestation as the Elohai Elohim founders races. They were the guardians of Gate 12, because that was the most precious gate that has to be guarded in this time matrix. Because if it gets destroyed, the time matrix gets severed and the life field gets hijacked. And if something can do that, it can literally take over the life field and exist for quite a long time without having to cooperate with anything else, including Source, by feeding off the consciousness that's in there, which violates the free will of the life field that's being hijacked in that way. The original conflict started with the Elohai, Elohim that had become distorted, that were the ones that had gone into hominid ape form by combining with the cetacean races. And it was a hominid aquatic ape. They could breathe air and water. They could lower in the densities and come down and be on land or be in air. On land or in water. These groups became very upset with another group from the fallen, the Seraphim, the Seraphim races. There was a group of reptilians and a group of draconian forms from Vega that were becoming just as twisted in consciousness as the Elohim were becoming from the 11th planet Avion. So these guys were starting to war with each other, where they started to go into advanced polarity problems, polarity dramas. That was not part of the original intention of this time matrix. This time matrix had been seeded under something called the Emerald Covenant. There was a coevolution treaty, an agreement treaty, that there were certain intentions that this time matrix was created to experience. They were joyful. There would be, because you need polarity, there would be enough of the negative to make the whole experience possible. But it was a free will matrix. It was supposed to be built on love, joy, freedom, and the ability. It was an ascension time matrix to be able to have its life forms come in and ascend, and other life forms from other time matrices could come here to get out of their problems in their time matrices and heal and move up through the system. The Emerald Covenant was entered by, in fact, it was the reason why the Founders Races were appointed as the Founders Races. They, as Janus, the Senate Master's Consciousness, chose to come in to do this because it was Source intention to assist some of the other time matrices that have fallen. So it goes way back, this last wave of our conflict that we're in. It's not that the beings that became, who are choosing to be our adversaries right now in space-time, it's not that they're evil or they're bad, but they have twisted thinking. They have twisted thinking because they have twisted fire letters in their manifestation templates. The Keelan codes that are made of the Partakai units are shaped wrong because the Partakai units are going in the wrong balances. They were split wrong, where we have the natural split between Partakai, Partakai, and Partakam. We have the 45 and the other 45 that splits into 11 and 2/3 and 33 and 1/3. They have a different split, which means their orientation to polarity is not in harmony with this time matrix. So this is where the conflict came from. And this is another point in the matrix where it is coming to a head and where it can be solved. When we work with Merkaba mechanics, when we work with becoming aware of the creation physics that we're a part of, we are entering the process of reclaiming our memory of what humans were created for and what, as a human, once upon a time when we remembered who we are, what we chose to come here for. We were a team. We were a team of ascended masters that chose to come in as the Founders Races, that chose to create together. The human DNA template is primarily Elohai, Elohim, Emerald Order, but it also has elements of the Violet Order and the Gold Order in it. So it carries the template for ascension up into the primal light fields, into the sound fields, for all of the other life forms in this time matrix, which means other life forms, if they choose to enter the Emerald Covenant, can be assisted in gaining incarnation into a human form where they can progressively gain back the 12-strand or higher imprint, which will allow them the ability to reclaim their ability to have ascension and to become Christed beings and regain their free will. And they're at one minute with Source. So it's a big picture we're in the middle of. Let's see. Okay, we can keep going. Oh, you're back to this. Yes, thank you. I haven't seen that in a while. This I will try to go through quickly. This is a Kathara grid for people who have not taken any of the other workshops. For those who have, you're probably very sick of looking at it by now, I wouldn't doubt, because we go through this all the time. This structure is very important because it shows the basic interrelationship. It's a map. It's a basic interrelationship of the primal structure that all manifestation templates are based on. It's the primal structure by which Source created the holographic projection field that we could then enter to experience the hologram. It is the relationship of, this one shows the relationship of the first dimensions, 1 through 12. It shows their relationship in frequency and how they make these interesting patterns of energy. It makes 3 pillars of frequency, which of course correspond to the different primal light fields. They will be the paths of frequency that the density 5 primal light fields from D13, 14, and 15 would come down once they're activated. Now, your body has a template like that, and there are points on and in your body that directly correspond to it. Planetary body is the same way. On the planet, these points are the Stargate points. There are 12 primary Stargates in the planetary Templar. Each one of them corresponds to one dimensional frequency band, and that is the one that will run that dimensional frequency, or that flash line sequence, that flashing on and off sequence of Partakai, Partakay, and Particum through the planetary grids. This is the slowest flash line sequence, dimension 1, and up there is the highest, dimension 12. That's the pre-matter template. Now, these Stargates, these are Stargates, but they're also a Cathara grid. Every form that is manifest, first when it puts its consciousness into this time matrix, into the primal sound field, starts to pick up this pattern. All right, there are actually 2 of these linked together. At D13, you would have another number 1 that would climb up, going from D13 up through the sound fields and back into source. So there's actually a set of 2 of those, which would be 24 points, which actually creates sets of 24 time matrices. Sets of them. So our time matrix and its parallel, you have 24 of those, and then you'd have a replica of that, and it's a very, very large creation platform. But this is very important when we want to understand what it is we're protecting, first of all. If we're supposed to be the planetary guardians, and that means we're guarding Stargates, what are these things? Where are these things, right? Well, we have Stargates in our DNA and in our bodies that are the places where our matter transmutes when we interact with one of the planetary Stargates. So a Stargate in your body, or the centers in your body, that will allow the shift of angular rotation of particle spin to take place are the internal parts of your template that correspond to your Maharic shield, or your D12 pre-matter template. Now you also have, as part of your pre-matter template, something called your tribal shield, which is your connection to the race template, and the tribal shield is connected to the planetary shield. It's from the planetary shield level connection that you have in your own DNA template that you will be able to, if you activate those frequencies, be able to see a Stargate once those areas become open on the planet. And a person who doesn't have, if you want to see Stargate 4, you must have Strand 5 activation. Remember, you'll see as solid, or see in the hologram, what is one dimensional frequency band below your station of awareness, and your station of awareness is where your DNA template is activated to. Now, when we do Cathara healing, that program, the reason it was really given was the fastest way to begin the process of getting your DNA activated, because you also find that each DNA strand level corresponds to a chakra level, and we have 15 primary chakras. We learned that we can activate the 12th chakra, which will trigger activation of the 12th strand, and there are several types of Kundalini activations that you can very gently give to yourself through the D12 frequency, which is the pre-matter template, the Christos frequency. That means you're not going to hurt yourself, because the Christos template holds the divine right distribution of energy. So you can't bring something in that's going to make, mess up your systems. So when you do it through the D12 frequency, which is a place that actually opens below your feet, the 12th chakra is below your feet about 6 inches, and the place where you activate your Maharic shield, or the portion of your DNA template that holds the entire strand template, is about 12 inches below the feet. That's what I believe they started this class with yesterday. Phil was reading it, and Marianne, I think. That is the beginning of the process of working with the frequencies. So when we're dealing with Stargates, it's important to realize they're inside and they're outside too. And to see the outside ones, you've got to open the inside ones. Okay? Yes? Okay. Ka-va-ra is a sound vibration translation. It means ka means light, tha means sound, and ra refers to one. Light sound union is what the translation is, and the language is ancient Anahazi, which was the name of the Elohai Elohim founders, Christos founders race, the Emerald Order founders race, and that was the first spoken externalized language. They spoke the language of the Akkadic sound field, which was the first individuation of source. So it is the most complex and at the same time the most simple sound tones translated. So that's where that name comes from, and a lot of others too. Most of the new words you might encounter in this material, especially ones that have interesting sounds to them, like Viraje, Gundare. These are all translations from the original language, which was the Akkadic language, the first sound projection. So you could really call it the language of Source, or the language of God. And from there, all other languages emerged. Okay? Let's see. Now, we will move on. It gets more fun.
Got maps and keys.
What are we doing? Yeah. Let me see. Yeah, I'll do maps and keys in a minute, honey. And then we'll do this one. Just want to show you really quick what a stargate basically functions like. It's a set of vortices. This is the planet. It's a set of vortices that exist in the planetary core. It's really 3 axes that cross over at different angle relations to each other. The angle relations are actually, you have a vertical, and you have a 45 degree and another 45 degree cutting through, and they all spin. Now, these vortices line up with vortices that would be in inner Earth and in parallel Earth, and then vertically they line up with with Terra and Gaia. The Halls of Amenti stargates are connected to inner Earth, but they emerge through Earth's natural stargates. There's actually 12 of these, not just 6, but it would have been too crowded on the diagram. So this just gives you an idea of these sets of vortices. Now, vortices are like cones of energy, like that make little bow ties, because their little small point is locked together. The little bow tie is called a crystal seal. It's a place where frequencies interface in a way that creates a magnetic lock. A crystal seal holds the vortices apart, and one side of the vortice will be magnetic, and the other side will be electrical. That means one will be made out of myons, one will be made out of dions, and they are the circulatory system. They're the planetary chakra system by which energy between here and the particle universe and the antiparticle universe continually circulates. The primal life force currents move through planetary systems, galactic systems, universal systems, through these systems of vortices. Now, what's interesting about the vortices, when you release the polarization on the seal that keeps them separated into a bow tie, they naturally come together. And when you take 2 vortices together like this, they form what's called a Merkaba field. They form a set of counter-rotating spirals of energy, interwoven counter-rotating spirals of energy, that at the center creates a sphere of energy that's called a form constant. The form constant can be compared to looking at the Vesica Pisces symbols of the 2 circles interfacing with each other, where one is the dimension above, or the density above, one is the one below, and then one is that inner Earth timeline, inner Earth Terra Gaia, is the timeline that links the 2. You have density 1 time field, density 2 time field, and then you have that inner time field running here, where it links the parallels, and it makes a vertical link, and it makes a horizontal link between parallels through the inner system, and a vertical link through each of them by skipping from one to the other. So these sets, in the normal, when we're not in a stellar activation cycle, the planet simply it's holding at its core a certain amount of frequency that it picked up from the last stellar activation cycle. Has X amount of frequency, and so does the parallel planet, and so does the inner Earth planet. And there's a gentle flow of frequency of myons, dions, and trions. They actually move through these vortices and turn into each other. What's a myon here will become a dion there, and vice versa. And they collide with each other and become trions in the meantime in the inner Earth time field. This is how the reality field is projected. One will turn on. Let's say parallel Earth flashes on and becomes real, right? It flashes off, then inner Earth flashes on, then flashes off, and then our Earth hologram flashes on. And there's a cycle to them. Yeah, it's the Trinity. That's the divine Trinity concept, as it's expressing in the hologram, which started with the Partike, Partikai, and Particum. Okay, so this just basically shows you the structure of stargates. Now, stargates, there's a difference between a stargate and a time portal. All right, portals are basically, that word is used to refer to the ones that go horizontal or diagonal. The ones that go on straight verticals are considered main stargates. Now, portals, you could go through to inner Earth or to parallel Earth, or you could take a diagonal one and you could go through and you could access a stargate point from certain crossover points and get on a vertical to go up to the next. It's like the long way home, zigzagging up through the angles that go like this, that make crosses. The fastest way to ascend and to make thoughts manifest and to basically gain your mastery back is to work with the stargates, the ones both inside of you in your DNA and the ones on the planet. Now, they form Merkaba fields inside. This is what's happening. When I talk about you have Merkaba fields inside your body that need to activate, that'll activate your DNA. They're little bow ties, black and white hole sets. Where there is a transmitting particle, there will be its counterpart, receiving particle. All right. When there's a level of polarization between them, where they have the same charge there that actually keeps them repelling each other so they don't make the link. When the polarity in here reverses on one part of it, it allows them to come together to create that window, that form constant. That's what opens up to another time field. That's where in your DNA template, when you have the coding, the scalar templates that are working like this, turn into one of those, that's where you start to get the awareness of yourself in that incarnation, in that other space-time location coming through. You're literally starting to blend your thought field with its thought field because they're no longer separated by the vibrations that were holding them apart through the template. But on the planetary level, there are major stargates. There are 12 primary stargates, and then there are 12 stargates in inner Earth that are directly connected to our stargates through something called Q sites. Q sites are activation sites for Earth's stargates. So there's 24 locations on the surface of the planet that have to do with running the Templar. This is what we are being trained to start to become aware of. Because if things go well in our hologram, when the time comes that the Maharaji of Sirius B and some of the other guardian races let themselves be known, and we get to meet the inner Earth people, which the time will come for that, the keys to the Templar were given to us by Source originally. They were taken from us, and we kind of let them be taken from ourselves by making some decisions that weren't the best that we could have made. We're having the keys to the Templar returned. So we need to know, first of all, what is a Templar? That's the energy circulatory system of the planet, the galaxy, and the universe, and your body, and everything else that's manifest. And it operates through sets of black and white holes that form portals and stargates that cross over between time zones and space zones, which are zones in the hologram, which are vibrational fields of energy, vibration and oscillation. The black holes are associated with the drawing particles, the base magnetics, which are the myons, and the transmitting particles are the dions. These are the fields that create your internal Merkaba fields and also the fields that are called the Merkaba fields around the body. And the larger ones, if you charge them with D12 frequency by opening your 12th chakra below your feet, which is what we're going to do this evening on the beach when we have time to really get into it, you can use the outer Merkaba, get it activated with the D12 frequency subharmonics, and then use it to temporarily manually reset the proper spin ratios, which means you're going to get your Merkaba spinning in the right spin ratios to get that particle-antiparticle balance back, even though the planetary grids don't have it yet, which means it'll last temporarily, and eventually the planetary grids will override your thought form and put you back in reversal. But it's the beginning process, learning to use your own stargates, which is your Merkaba field, to get control of your body. So you and your body and your what's in between, which is your emotional self, it's kind of sandwiched in between your mental body and your physical body, where you can all have a reacquaintance party and start to get to know each other a little better, where you start to feel more connected to yourself here. And also, it will begin the process of bringing in your higher levels of consciousness. Okay, let's see. You want to do that one, honey? Please. Thank you. Is it break time in some minutes? I got 5 minutes. Yeah. 5 or 7 minutes I can get all the way through stargates before we go to break. Then we can pick up on something else. But okay. Now this diagram shows. Now these diagrams are all in the Templar manual. So those of you who've gotten that, you do have these diagrams. This shows a bit of what I showed you before with the Particum universe, which is the one our consciousness is stationed in right now, or the majority of our consciousness is stationed in. You have the inner Earth line. These represent timelines, okay? Progressions of cycles of time. A cycle of time is a cycle of vibration and oscillation the consciousness adopts within itself that gives it a format for sequencing energy projection so its hologram of moments can project out
from one to the next, to the next, to the next, okay? So these are timelines and time cycles, but in truth, they are vibrational oscillation patterns that you hold within your consciousness that keep you rooted in the hologram. So to move from one time space-time to another means not only shifting the angular rotation of particle spin, it means you're going to change the time rhythms that your consciousness and your body is functioning on. It means you're going to change the flash lines that we talked about. If you're in density 1, that means you're following a set of 3 flash line programs that interface with each other that go to the rhythm of the density 1 system. If you want to go to density 2, you need to raise that frequency up to the density 2 rhythms. What will change your flashline sequences is changing the speed of your Merkaba. And when you use the original Christos Merkaba pattern, which is the 33 1/3 and 11 2/3 breakdown between magnetic and electrical, it will naturally reset them and get the right speeds going on every level of the Merkaba. So this diagram shows you the 3 systems again, the parallel, our system, and the inner Earth. And this is the Kathara grid run at a bit of an angle. This shows you the connections. Remember the Kathara grid showed the 12 primary stargates that go from D1 up into D12 pre-matter? That's the first step of getting out of density or getting mastery over the coming in and going out process. This shows you how they link, how the 12 primary stargates link through the bodies of density 1 Earth, density 2 Tara, density 3 Gaia, and then they would link to the Christos template, which is density 4 Aramatena, through SG Stargate 10, 11, and 12. Here's the same set of them working in inner Earth, but inner Earth is this and this combined. So it not only has this template of the 12 stargates that are running in the parallel, they actually run in the reverse rotation to the ones in ours because stargates rotate. It has both, so it has twice as many stargates, just like it has 2 suns. So when I talk about the halls of Amenti stargates, I'm talking about this system which has been enhanced with a series of 12 crystal pylon temples that are, some of them are here, there are 12 of them on density 1 inner Earth. There are a set of 12 for each of the planetary level stargates on density 2 Tara. For each one of these, which represent the universal stargates, there are 12 universal ones. Then there on every planet, there are 12 points, 12 planetary ones, where those 12 universal ones plug in. So there is a set of crystal pylon temples. Now in the front of the manual, this manual, we have Leela to thank for these pictures. Leela, a friend of ours here, got sent on a journey. Do you see these crystal pictures here with the little person? The little person there is Leela. She got to go to see these. When I talk about crystal pylon temples, these are massive selenite quartz crystal structures that run the photoradionic energies of the stargates through the planetary rock bed and through the planetary template. They keep the inner Earth stargates opened at all times. So the inner Earth does not have to wait for a stellar activation cycle in order to benefit from the frequencies that come through from the stargates. It's all right to leave your stargates open if they're being properly maintained and kept in balance. What they will do is provide a massive free energy system for the planet that has awesome power, that doesn't create any nuclear waste, that doesn't create any... It's a power that's in harmony with Source because it's built upon the proper use of Source energy and the natural use of Source elements. So when I talk about the halls of Amenti, I'm talking about the gates and the temples, these beautiful crystals. They look like those massive, these are tiny ones compared to the size of them. They're like the size, bigger than the Empire State Building type crystals. These are crystals you could live in, all right? Like, the only thing I've ever seen that comes close to them is in quite a while ago they had that first Superman movie out. I remember a scene where he was a baby and there was these massive crystal caves. They're absolutely gorgeous. I got so homesick when I said, oh, I know I've been there. You know, those places exist. There's some of the things we will get to see eventually. If we can make the shift of consciousness and the shift of particle spin into the chemical matter base, where our chemical matter base would be in the inner Earth timeline. I have been to inner Earth because I've had help. When I was in my childhood, I had help of making that particle spin shift. with the DNA activation, I had help because I was taken there for training. That's where I got my Melchizedek Cloister ordinations. By the way, I'm not of the Alpha Omega order. I'm not an Anunnaki. And we're from the Holy Order of the Unisai, is what the Melchizedek Cloister people are. It's the Elohai Elohim Emerald Order. Anyway, Inner Earth exists, and it is one of the most beautiful reality fields that I remember experiencing since I've been in the densities. There's a lot of places I don't remember in this body. I can't hold all the memory in this body. But everything is more, well, first of all, it's bigger than it is here. Our bodies are larger. There's more space between our atoms. And everything is larger. The trees, the plants, the fruit. You have fruit like apples and lemons. You begin to get the Alice in Wonderland feeling. Did I shrink? No, you grew. So these are real places.